Do you ever find yourself getting caught up in the new wave of mixes coming out and finally feel like you have a handle on it, but then you have a band come in that doesn't want any type of modern production? They want things to sound more authentic or old school, not as polished. And the first question I'm sure that you internalize is like, well, if you wanted an old school style mix, why would you come to me when I don't even do that kind of thing? But whatever, we gotta eat, right? And regardless of genre or style choice, it's our job to make the band happy and give them what they want, regardless of our opinion, to an extent. Well, when they give you references of older bands, you need to sort of put yourself in the mindset of those engineers from back then. How would they have approached this differently? I mean, the first thought is probably working on a console, right? But this is so much more involved than that. By the end of this video, you'll have an understanding of the different types of EQ moves used in modern and old school mixes. So what's happening, fam? Miami here with JST, and I thought this was an interesting topic because one could argue that we prefer the way that music sounds now because of all the tools we have at our disposal. But what if having all these options is taking away from the source material? Maybe there was something to using the few options that they had. I'm saying the few options they had as if like having a console is a disadvantage or something, but you know what? Maybe it is. Unless you're Mutt Lange, who would EQ every single syllable on a vocal differently sometimes, while we would just throw soothe on it. Ain't nobody got time for all that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
We're going to get into this and figure out who has the right idea when it comes to proper EQ technique across the frequency spectrum. The proper way to boost our subs and boost our highs. And on that subject, click that subscribe button to boost my subs, because that will definitely boost my high. I'm high on life, people. Get your heads out of the gutter. Make sure to click that like button, and hopefully the only bell you touch today won't be on an EQ. My transition game is still crazy. Wait, don't think that I forgot. And we have to announce the winner for the daking mic pre, and we're gonna do that somewhere in this video, so stay tuned. The first difference in the way of EQing is how people simply used to EQ on a console versus using multiple EQs on a single source. So the old school would have their filters and a few bands to get a source right on a popular EQ like a Neve. A modern plugin chain for us can have tons of EQs on it, even if we're not thinking about it. Let's think of a vocal chain. Waves REQ4 to roll off the low end because it has that adjustable curve and it's a habit to pull it up. Q10 or Fab filter for cuts or boosts. Soothe as a dynamic EQ. A de-esser, which is another dynamic EQ, and we still fight with the vocal chain sometimes, right?
It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the...
There's actually a bit of beauty in the simplicity they used to have. We're kind of spoiled, and because of that, we rely on tons of products to get the job done. What this can lead to is having too many options to focus, which decreases productivity, but does give the option for a more polished sound. But wait a second. I wonder what St. Anger's snare might have sounded like if they had all of these tools at their disposal. I love Bob Rock, but come on, that one was crazy. Let's listen to it for a second. So unless Bob's snare can redeem itself, buy everything. Every plugin I mentioned. Wait. So unless Bob's snare can redeem itself, buy everything. Achievement unlocked. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. That was my best transition yet. Transition game leveled up. So yeah, I don't think less is always more. Even though I consider Yngwie Malmsteen from the old school, there was something he said once that stuck with me. Less is more? No, more is more.
How could less be more? It's impossible. More is more.
So we have more tools at our disposal now. Just understand that if a project is calling for less polish, let's try bringing it down to a single EQ and see what we can do with that. Which brings me to the second difference in the style of EQing. Broadband versus notching. Let's take a second to think about the first EQs that were used in consoles. Neve, API, and EMI or Chandler. None of these had a very tight Q, so everything was pretty broadband until the SSL, which came out around 1980. I mean, that means pretty much all of the infamous stuff like Pink Floyd, the Beatles, was just gentle broadband shaping. The term that became associated with these broadband styled EQ moves was musical. So the thought was the more we were able to flexibly manipulate the original source, the more unmusical it sounded. But just to clarify, the SSL was still considered musical for the most part. The EQs used today are so much more drastic than what the SSL EQ was even capable of. I remember about 4 years ago when I was working on a mix, and I was talking to my good friend Al Levy from Nail the Mix, and I was asking his opinion on the song. And he says, I can already tell that you're over EQing these guitars, notching out every little frequency, and it's making the guitars sound extremely thin. I want you to go back, use a 4-band EQ, and make it sound good with just that. Sure enough, I went back to the drawing board with it, and I got a sound in which the guitars were massive. I gotta give a redeeming quality for Bob Rock here. I think back to the Metallica Black album that was mixed on an SSL with a few band EQ, and those are some of the beefiest guitars I've ever heard. So be careful when using notches because you can take the soul out of the instrument if you dig too deep into it with EQ, unless it's 4K. Then we can just, all nod and agree at the smart choice you made. So yes, broadband for more musical, old school styles, and notching to be modern and get your hands dirty. The third difference is they used minimal, additive, and subtractive EQ moves. We don't really go by these rules anymore. I sort of brought this up in my video about audio school, but they had to get the concept of teaching that from somewhere, right? Old school mixers would not do the drastic boosting and cutting that we do today. By limiting themselves to these thoughts, a lot of this stuff actually starts to make sense why they would redo entire takes for stuff that today we would consider perfectly workable material. It's funny how we work in the box, but they put themselves in one. I gotta write that down. That line was fire. Many of the greatest engineers of today will tell you that there's no wrong way to make a sound. So as long as you can make it sound good, don't think too much into it. But if you're recording a band and they specifically want that old school sound, it means you have to spend way more time perfecting the source during tracking, which will get expensive for them. So as long as they're willing to dish out that cash, give them what they want, I suppose. So let's go over the big three one more time. Single EQs versus using multiple EQs. Broadband versus notching. Minimal, additive, and subtractive EQ. And I'll run off a couple more that I don't think are as important. The use of hardware versus digital filters, that gets kind of tricky because of the style of aliasing that happens, how they used to use de-essers in place of a dynamic EQ, even though de-essers would have to have upwards and downward compression and expansion to even come close to what we use now. There's always so much to talk about in this world of audio, but I never know how nerdy you want me to get in these videos. If you feel like we've gotten the basics covered and you want to start doing some deeper dives into these topics, please, just let me know in the comments below. That's how I determine the direction I'm gonna go with these videos. It's completely based on you guys. So the next time you're recording something and you need to go for a more raw sound or old school sound, you've been pointed in the right direction. Once again, want to thank all those people that participated in the Daking Mic pre-contest. All you had to do was leave a comment and we're going to pull that winner up on screen right about now. Thank you so much for entering. Just make sure to hit up support@joeysturgistones.com to claim your prize and we'll be shipping that guy out to you. If you're an engineer on the come up, give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. You only have to do it one time. And tap that bell for notifications so when a video drops, you know the location. Until next time, I am out of here. Mic drop. Except as engineers, we know I'd never really drop this thing because that get really expensive, even if it is a piece of sure. Later.